They left me at Rose Hill on a Tuesday morning in October, when the maple trees were bleeding their last brilliant red into the grey New England sky. David carried my suitcase. Emily held my elbow as though I might topple over on the walkway, though I had walked this same uneven pavement outside my own home for 43 years without incident. They spoke in those hushed, careful voices people use around the dying or the very old, as if volume itself might shatter whatever fragile thing I had become in their minds. "Just for a little while, Mom," David said, not meeting my eyes as he set the suitcase down in the carpeted lobby. The carpet was industrial beige, the kind designed not to show stains or wear, the kind that announced this was a place where things were managed, contained, kept in order until we can figure out the best arrangement. I wanted to ask what arrangement required figuring. I had an arrangement. It was called My House, the one Robert and I bought in 1981, the one where I had raised these 2 children, the one where I still lived quite capably until this morning. But I didn't ask. I stood there with my purse clutched against my ribs and watched Emily sign papers at the front desk, her pen moving in quick, efficient strokes, the way she signed everything, permission slips when the kids were small, birthday cards, presumably now the documents that deposited her 74-year-old mother into a place called Rose Hill, as though I were a parcel being held for safekeeping. "We'll call you tonight," Emily said, kissing my cheek. Her perfume was expensive, floral. It made my throat close. "Get settled in. There's a beautiful courtyard. You'll love it here." Then they were gone. I stood in that lobby with my single suitcase and my purse, and the autumn light coming through windows that had safety locks I could see even from where I stood. And I understood with absolute clarity that I had been erased. Not killed, not even really harmed, just removed, placed somewhere convenient, somewhere they wouldn't have to think about me except during visiting hours, which I suspected would grow farther and farther apart until they forgot to come at all. A woman in coral pink scrubs approached me, her smile professionally warm. Her name tag read Stephanie Care Coordinator. "Mrs. Monroe, welcome to Rose Hill. Let me show you to your rooms." I followed her down a hallway that smelled of industrial disinfectant and something else underneath it, something human and sad that no amount of cleaning could quite erase. Other residents sat in common areas, some in wheelchairs, some on sofas, most staring at a television mounted high on the wall showing a cooking program no one appeared to be watching. An elderly man in a cardigan waved at me as I passed. I lifted my hand in return, a gesture that felt like surrender. My room was small, twin bed, dresser, nightstand, window overlooking the parking lot. Stephanie showed me the bathroom I would share with the woman next door, explained the meal schedule, pointed out the emergency call button I was to press if I needed assistance. "You'll meet everyone at dinner," she said brightly. "We're like a family here." After she left, I sat on the bed and looked at my hands. They were spotted with age now, the skin thin and loose over the knuckles, but they were still my hands. The hands that had held my babies typed 40 years of correspondence for the law firm where I worked as a secretary, weeded the garden Robert and I planted together, held his hand in the hospital when the cancer took him 8 years ago. These hands were still capable, still strong, still mine. I unpacked my suitcase slowly, hanging my dresses in the narrow closet, placing my toiletries in the shared bathroom, setting the framed photo of Robert on the nightstand where I could see his face before I slept. He was smiling in the photo, standing in our garden, holding tomatoes he had just picked. That garden would be someone else's now, I supposed. Someone who would buy the house David and Emily would sell. Someone who wouldn't know that Robert planted that garden the year after we moved in, or that we always grew more tomatoes than we could possibly eat because he loved watching them ripen in the sun. I had just finished unpacking when a soft knock came at my door. "Come in," I said. An elderly woman entered, moving slowly with a walker. She had white hair cut short and efficient, and eyes that looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. "I'm Mabel," she said. "Room next door. Thought I'd introduce myself before dinner. First day's always the worst." "Helen," I said. "Helen Munro." "How long did they tell you you'd be here?" Mabel asked, settling herself into the room's single chair with the careful movements of someone who had learned not to trust their own body. "Just for a little while," I said, repeating David's words, "until they figure out the best arrangement." Mabel nodded slowly, her expression gentle and knowing. "That's what they told me too, 3 years ago." The words hung in the air between us like smoke. 3 years. I looked at this woman who had been left here, who had been told it was temporary, who had believed she would go home again, and instead had watched 3 years disappear into this beige-carpeted building with its locked windows and its professional smiles. "I see," I said quietly. "Most of us here," Mabel continued, "we got the same story just until we sell the house, just until we sort out your finances, just until you're stronger. Meanwhile, they're cleaning out our homes and spending our money and visiting less and less until we're just here. Like furniture they moved into storage and forgot about." I wanted to tell her that my children weren't like that. That David and Emily loved me, that this was truly temporary, that I would go home soon. But I had seen Emily's signature on those papers. Quick, efficient, final. The signature of someone who had already decided, already moved on, already filed me away underhandled. "Thank you for telling me," I said. Mabel nodded and pushed herself up from the chair, her walker scraping slightly against the floor. "Dinner's at 5:30. I'll knock for you. We can sit together if you'd like." After she left, I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot, at the cars coming and going, at the world beyond the glass that suddenly felt very far away. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of amber and rust, and I thought about my house 10 miles from here, empty now, or perhaps already being walked through by realtors, being measured and photographed and listed. my life reduced to square footage and hardwood floors and a kitchen that needed updating. My phone sat on the nightstand. I had brought it, of course. David had made sure I had it, had programmed his number and Emily's into it, had shown me again how to make calls even though I had been using phones for 7 decades and didn't require a tutorial. I waited for it to ring, for David to call and say they had arrived home safely, to check on me, to tell me he loved me. It didn't ring. At 5:15, Mabel knocked on my door, and together we made our way to the dining room, 2 old women shuffling toward a dinner neither of us particularly wanted, in a place neither of us had chosen, because the people who were supposed to love us had decided this was easier than letting us live. The days at Rose Hill had a rhythm that was meant to be soothing and instead felt suffocating. Breakfast at 8, morning activities at 10, chair yoga or bingo or someone reading aloud from a mystery novel none of us could follow because we'd missed the previous chapters. Lunch at noon. Free time in the afternoon, which meant sitting in the common room or returning to our small rooms, or for those who were mobile enough, walking the courtyard loop that was exactly 1/10 of a mile and surrounded by a fence that was decorative wrought iron on the outside and pure containment on the inside. I walked that loop every afternoon, counting my steps, timing myself, keeping my body strong because I understood now with perfect clarity that weakness was what they wanted. Weakness was what made this arrangement permanent. On the 4th day, I asked to use the computer in the small library off the main hall. The care coordinator, a different one now, this one named Marcus, showed me how to log in, hovering until I assured him I knew how to use the internet, thank you. I had been using computers since before he was born. I pulled up the real estate listings for our town. There it was, my house, my home, listed for $485,000, photos professionally taken, every room staged and cleaned and empty of anything that marked it as mine. The living room where Robert and I had watched the news every evening. The kitchen where I had taught Emily to make pie crust. The bedroom where I had slept beside my husband for 34 years and alone for 8 more. Charming 3BR colonial in desirable neighbourhood, original hardwood floors, updated kitchen, mature landscaping, estate sale motivated sellers, estate sale. As though I had died. As though I were already gone, and all that remained was the division of assets, the distribution of things that had been mine, but apparently were no longer. I sat there staring at the screen, at the photographs of my empty house, and something cold and clear settled in my chest. Not anger. Anger was hot and reactive and uncontrolled. This was something different. This was understanding. This was seeing exactly what was happening and deciding with perfect calm that I would not allow it. I cleared the browser history. I had learned that much from the news stories about privacy and returned to my room. My address book was in my purse, the old-fashioned paper kind with alphabetical tabs that Robert had given me 20 years ago. I flipped to the L's. Lydia Patterson. My neighbour of 15 years, the woman who had brought me casseroles after Robert died, who still called on my birthday, who had promised to water my plants while I was away. I used my cell phone to call her, standing by my window so I could see the parking lot, so I could feel less contained. "Helen," Lydia's voice was warm with surprise. "I was just thinking about you. How are you settling in?" "Lydia," I said, keeping my voice level, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly." A pause, then carefully, "Of course." "Did David or Emily tell you how long I would be at Rose Hill?" Another pause, longer this time. "They said you needed some time to recover your strength, that it might be a few months." "Did they tell you they've listed my house for sale?" Silence. Then, quietly, "No, Helen, no, they didn't tell me that. It's online, photos and everything, estate sale it says." My voice didn't shake. I was proud of that. "I need your help." "Anything," Lydia said immediately. "Tell me what you need." "I need you to go to my house. David and Emily have keys, but I hid a spare under the blue ceramic pot by the back door, the one with the dried-out geranium. Inside, in my desk in the study, there's a file marked Important Documents. I need you to photograph every page and email them to me. Can you do that?" "When?" "Today, now, if possible, before they clean anything else out." "I'm leaving now," Lydia said. "Give me an hour." After we hung up, I sat on my bed and felt my heart beating steady and strong in my chest. I had made a decision. I had asked for help. I had done something other than wait passively to see what would happen to me next. It felt like waking up after a long, drowsy illness. 53 minutes later, my phone chimed with an email notification. Lydia had sent 19 pages of documents. Deed to the house, Robert's death certificate, my birth certificate, the copy of the power of attorney I had signed 5 years ago when David had convinced me it was practical, sensible, just in case, because what if something happened and he needed to handle things for me? That power of attorney gave David and Emily control of my finances, my property, my medical decisions. I had signed it because I trusted them, because they were my children, because it had seemed like the responsible thing to do. I scrolled through the other documents. Bank statements, investment accounts, the small pension from my years at the law firm, my social security information, all of it neatly organised because I had always been organised, had always kept careful records, had always been responsible about these things. Now, all of it was in their control. I opened a new document on my phone and started making notes, names, numbers, dates. Everything I could see in the documents Lydia had sent. I worked slowly, carefully, the way I had worked at the law firm, checking each entry twice, making sure I had everything right. It took me until dinner time. That night, after the evening meal of overcooked chicken and vegetables that had been steamed into submission, after Mabel and I had returned to our rooms, I lay in my narrow bed and stared at the ceiling and thought about the legal office where I had worked for 40 years. The senior partner had been Jonathan Wright. He had retired 12 years ago, but his son Thomas Wright had taken over the practice. And I had known Thomas since he was in high school, since his father had brought him to the office on school holidays and I had shown him how to use the copying machine. Thomas Wright would be, 45 now? 46? Old enough to be a competent attorney, young enough perhaps to remember the secretary who had helped him with his college application essay. In the morning, I would call Thomas Wright's office. I would make an appointment. I would explain my situation, calmly, clearly, without emotion, because emotion was what they expected from old women, and I would not give them what they expected. I would not be managed. I would not be convenient. I would not disappear quietly into this beige building with its locked windows and its carefully scheduled days. I would go home. The thought settled into my bones like a promise, like a vow, like the first true thing I had felt since David and Emily had left me in that lobby 4 days ago. Outside my window, the parking lot lights hummed their orange glow into the darkness. Someone in another room had their television on too loud. Mabel was coughing softly through the shared bathroom wall. I closed my eyes and thought about my garden. The roses needed pruning before winter. The perennials needed cutting back. The soil needed turning. I would do those things soon, because that garden was mine, and I was not done with it yet. Thomas Wright's secretary scheduled me for a phone consultation the following Tuesday. 5 days away. 5 days of walking the courtyard loop and eating tasteless meals and watching Mabel grow greyer around the eyes as she realized I was going to try something she had long ago given up on. "They won't let you leave," she said on Saturday evening when we sat together in the common room watching the sun set through windows we couldn't open. "The family has to sign you out. That's how it works." "Did you try?" I asked. She looked at her hands, folded in her lap, the skin thin and papery, spotted with age. "In the beginning. But my daughter had power of attorney. She said I wasn't thinking clearly, that I needed supervision. The doctor here agreed. So I stayed." "What would you do?" I asked. "If you could leave right now?" Mabel was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I had a condo. 15th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. I used to sit there in the mornings with my coffee and watch the sailboats. I'd go back there. I'd make coffee in my own kitchen. I'd look at my view." "Where's the condo now?" "Sold. My daughter said the equity would pay for my care here." "Better this way, Mom. No more worrying about maintenance or stairs or being alone." She said it like she was doing me a favour. Mabel's voice was soft, not bitter, just tired. Maybe she believed that. Maybe she still does. I thought about Emily's kiss on my cheek, her expensive perfume, her efficient signature. Maybe she did think she was helping. Maybe David did too. Maybe they had convinced themselves that this was kindness, that removing me from my own life was a form of love, a way of keeping me safe from myself. It didn't matter what they believed. What mattered was what I would allow. On Tuesday morning, I sat in the small library at exactly 10 o'clock and called Thomas Wright's office from my cell phone. His secretary connected me immediately. "Mrs. Munro," Thomas said, and I could hear his father's voice underneath his, that same courteous warmth. "It's been a long time. How are you?" "I need legal help, Thomas," I said, dispensing with pleasantries. "I signed a durable power of attorney 5 years ago, giving my children control of my finances and property. They have placed me in a care facility and listed my house for sale without my knowledge or consent. I want to revoke that power of attorney and regain control of my assets." A pause. Then, professionally, "Are you of sound mind, Mrs. Munro? Are you speaking of your own free will?" "I am 74 years old, Thomas. I have all my faculties. I am not confused or coerced. I am sitting in a care facility called Rose Hill because my children dropped me off here 2 weeks ago and haven't visited since. They told me it was temporary. They have listed my house as an estate sale. I want to go home." "Where's your house listed?" I gave him the details. I could hear him typing. "I see it," he said. "Listed 9 days ago. Real estate agent is Susan Chen with Harbour Realty." More typing. "Mrs. Munro, I can draft a revocation of power of attorney. You'll need to sign it in front of a notary. The facility should have one on staff. Once filed, your children will no longer have authority over your finances or property. But I need to ask, do you have concerns about your safety? Are there reasons your children felt you needed supervised care?" "I fell," I said. 6 months ago. Minor fracture in my wrist. It healed completely. But Emily started calling more often after that, suggesting I should think about my options for housing. David started talking about how the house was too big for one person, how the yard was too much work. They wore me down until I agreed to just visit Rose Hill. That visit became this. "Do you have your own transportation?" "My car is in my garage. I assume they haven't sold that yet." "Bank accounts?" "Joint with David as primary. My pension deposits there."
Credit cards?
"One, in my name, but the bill goes to David." Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Mrs. Munro, this is going to require several steps. First, we revoke the power of attorney. Second, we need to freeze the house sale. I can file an emergency motion claiming lack of proper authority. Third, we need to get you new bank accounts in your name only, new credit cards, and we need to redirect all your income to accounts your children cannot access. Fourth, we need to address your living situation. Are you being held there against your will?" "The doors aren't locked," I said. "Not officially. But everyone acts as though leaving would be inappropriate, dangerous, irresponsible. Then legally, you can leave whenever you choose. But practically, you'll need a place to go. I'm assuming your house is the goal." "My house is the only goal." "All right. I'm going to prepare documents. I'll email them to you. You'll need to print them, sign them in front of a notary, and send them back. Meanwhile, I'll contact the real estate agent and inform them that the listing was unauthorized and must be withdrawn immediately." I'll also draft a letter to your children informing them that you are revoking their authority and that any further financial transactions on your behalf will be considered theft. This will not be pleasant for them, Mrs. Munro. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Emily's signature, quick and efficient. About David's careful voice saying just for a little while, as he set my suitcase down and walked away. I'm prepared, I said. Good. One more thing, my fee. I'll need a retainer. Can you pay? I thought about the joint account, about David's control, about how I had no way to access my own money without his signature. Then I remembered the small emergency fund I had kept in cash, hidden in my desk at home, money Robert had insisted we keep just in case. Lydia, I said to Thomas, Lydia Patterson is my neighbour. She has access to my house. There's money there, cash. $3,000 in an envelope in my desk. I'll have her bring it to your office. That works. I'll expect her this week. Meanwhile, I'll draft everything and send it within 48 hours. Mrs. Munro? Yes? It's good to hear your voice again. I always thought you were the most competent person in my father's office. I'm glad you're still competent enough to fight for yourself. After we hung up, I sat in the library for a long time, looking at nothing, feeling the machinery of my reclamation beginning to turn, gears catching and pulling, the weight of my own life slowly shifting back into my hands where it belonged. The care coordinator found me there an hour later. Mrs. Munro, your daughter is here to see you. My heart, which had been beating steady and strong, stumbled slightly. Emily, here, now. I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and followed the coordinator to the visiting room. Emily was waiting with a folder in her hands and an expression on her face that I recognized immediately. Determination, efficiency, the look she wore when she was getting things done. "Mum," she said, standing to kiss my cheek. "How are you feeling?" "Fine," I said. "Perfectly fine." "Good. That's good." She gestured to the folder. "I brought some papers for you to sign. Just routine stuff, bank things, property transfer documents. Nothing for you to worry about." Property transfer documents? I looked at my daughter, this woman I had raised, whose homework I had checked, whose fears I had soothed, whose wedding I had planned, and I saw exactly what she was, a person who had decided I was inconvenient and was now systematically erasing me with the same efficiency she brought to every other project in her life. "I'm not signing anything," I said quietly. Emily blinked. "Mom, it's just paperwork to make things easier." "Easier for whom?" "For everyone. For you especially. You don't need to worry about bills or maintenance or any of that. We'll handle it." I sat down in one of the visiting room chairs, placed my hands flat on my thighs, and looked at my daughter with perfect clarity. "Emily," I said, "I know you've listed my house for sale. I know you've been accessing my accounts. I know you think you're doing what's best for me. But I'm revoking the power of attorney. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You will not sell my house. You will not control my finances, and you will not decide where I live or how I live." The colour drained from Emily's face. Then it rushed back, hot and angry.
"You're not thinking clearly," she said. "Mum, you can't live alone anymore. You fell. You could fall again. Or fall again."
I healed.
"You're 74. I'm aware. You need supervision."
I need my life back. We stared at each other across the small table in that visiting room with its cheerful artificial plants and its motivational posters about taking life one day at a time. Finally, Emily gathered her folder, stood up, and looked down at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're making a mistake," she said. "Perhaps," I said. "But it will be my mistake, not yours." She left without another word. I sat alone in that visiting room for a long time after she was gone, feeling the silence settle around me like weight, like water, like something I could finally breathe. Thomas Wright's documents arrived by email 2 days later. 43 pages, revocation of durable power of attorney, notice to financial institutions, motion to halt real estate transaction, letters to David and Emily Munro informing them of said revocation. I printed them in the library at 2 a.m, when the night staff was focused on their rounds and no one would see me standing at the small printer collecting page after page of my reclaimed autonomy. The next morning I asked to see the facility administrator. Her name was Patricia Hendricks, and she received me in an office that tried very hard to feel warm and homey, and instead felt like a corporate conference room wearing a disguise. Inspirational posters, fake plants, a photograph of her smiling family on the desk, positioned so visitors could see it. "Mrs. Munro," she said, her smile professional and just slightly concerned. "What can I do for you?" "I need documents notarized," I said, placing the stack on her desk. "I understand you have a notary on staff." She glanced at the top page. Her smile didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. "These are legal documents revoking power of attorney," she said. "Yes. Mrs. Munro, have you discussed this with your family?" "I'm discussing it with my attorney. My family will be notified after the documents are filed." "I see." She folded her hands on her desk, her posture suggesting therapy, suggesting we should have a conversation about what I was really feeling. "These are significant decisions. Perhaps you'd like to speak with our social worker first, or we could arrange a family meeting." "I would like my documents notarized," I said, keeping my voice level. "Today, if possible. I have an attorney waiting for them." "Of course." Her voice stayed pleasant, but her eyes had gone calculating. "Our notary is available this afternoon. 2 o'clock? That's fine." At 2 o'clock, I signed 43 pages in front of a notary named Martin, who witnessed each signature with the bored efficiency of someone who did this daily and never thought about what these papers meant. What they meant was simple. I existed again. I had authority over myself again. I was not just a name on someone else's account, someone else's property deed, someone else's list of problems to manage. That night, I called Lydia. "I'm bringing everything to the lawyer tomorrow," she said. "The cash, the documents you needed, and something else." She paused. "Helen, there are people coming to your house. A cleaning service. They're clearing things out, taking things to donation. I saw them loading your dining room chairs into a truck. Onze trags rår broden." Those chairs, oak. Robert had refinished them himself, sanding each spindle by hand, applying coat after coat of stain until they gleamed. We had sat in those chairs for 34 years of dinners, of homework help, of late-night conversations when the children were finally asleep. "How many did they take?" I asked. "All 6. All 6. As though I would never sit at that table again. As though I would never need chairs, because I would never have a dining room, never host a meal, never exist in a space large enough to contain a table and chairs and a life. "Thank you for telling me," I said. After we hung up, I walked to the window and looked at the parking lot and breathed slowly, carefully, because fury was threatening to rise up and choke me, and I could not afford fury. Fury was uncontrolled. Fury was what they would point to as evidence that I was unstable, incapable, in need of management. I needed to be cold, clear, precise. I needed to be exactly what I had always been: competent, organized, and absolutely determined. The next week passed in a strange suspension. I walked the courtyard, ate meals with Mabel, attended the activities because attendance was expected. But inside I was counting days, waiting for Thomas to file the documents, waiting for the machinery of law to catch up with the machinery of my children's plans. On Thursday, 11 days after I had signed the revocation, my phone rang. Thomas Wright. "It's done," he said. "Everything's filed. The power of attorney is officially revoked. I've sent notice to the banks, to the real estate agent, to your children's attorney. The house listing has been pulled. Your new accounts are ready. I'm emailing you the details now, and I've arranged for new credit cards to be sent to Lydia's address for safekeeping until you're ready to use them." "What happens next?" I asked. "Your children will likely contest this. They may claim you're not competent to make these decisions. They may try to get guardianship through the courts. If that happens, you'll need to submit to a competency evaluation, but that takes time, and meanwhile you have control. Your house, your money, your choices." "Thank you, Thomas. There's one more thing. I took the liberty of calling a locksmith. He's available Monday to change all the locks on your house. Lydia has agreed to meet him there if you'd like. Your children have keys, Mrs. Munro. If you're serious about going home, you need to make sure they can't walk in whenever they choose. Changed locks, new keys. A house where I controlled access." "Yes," I said. "Tell him Monday." When David called that evening, I almost didn't answer, but I did. Because I was not hiding. I was not afraid.
Mum!
He said, his voice tight with anger he was trying very hard to control. What the hell did you do? I revoked the power of attorney you and Emily have been using to control my life. I said calmly. You can't do that. You're not. He stopped, adjusted. Mum, we're trying to help you. You're not well. I'm perfectly well. You fell 6 months ago. I healed. David, I'm coming home. To what? Mum, we've already started cleaning out the house. We've donated furniture. We've packed up things. We're doing what's best. You donated my dining room chairs, I said, and my voice cracked slightly, just slightly. The ones your father refinished, the ones we sat in every Sunday dinner for 30 years. Silence. We thought you wouldn't need them, he said finally. You thought I was done needing things, I said. You thought I was done, but I'm not. Mum, please, let us help you. Let us take care of things. You are not taking care of me, I said. You are erasing me. There's a difference. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking. I sat on my bed and pressed my palms flat against my thighs and breathed until the shaking stopped, until I was steady again, until I was cold and clear and ready for whatever came next. The cafe was called Rosemary's, 3 miles from Rose Hill. I told the coordinator I was meeting a friend for lunch. She smiled and said how nice, how good for me to get out. Lydia was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 folders in front of her. When she saw me, she stood and hugged me hard, the kind of hug that said everything we didn't have words for. You look good, she said, which was a lie. I looked thin and grey and tired, but it was kind of her to say. Thomas Wright had sent the papers to Lydia's house. Deed transfer into a revocable trust with me as sole trustee. New bank signature cards, account transfer authorizations, everything that would remove David and Emily's access completely. How's the house? I asked, signing my name carefully on each page Lydia indicated. Locked. The locksmith came yesterday. I have your new keys. She slid an envelope across the table. And Helen, I cleaned. I couldn't stand seeing it the way they'd left it, half empty. Your things in boxes, so I unpacked everything, put it all back where it belonged. Your books on the shelves, your photos on the mantel. It's ready, whenever you're ready. I touched the envelope with the keys inside. New locks, new keys, old house, my house. Thank you, I said. When? Lydia asked. Soon. I need to be certain the legal pieces are in place, that they can't just drag me back. Thomas said you're legally free to leave any time. I know, but I need them to know it's permanent, that I'm not coming back, that I'm not confused or irrational or making a mistake I'll regret. I finished the last signature and pushed the papers back to her. These go to Thomas? I'm dropping them at his office this afternoon. We ordered lunch. I couldn't eat much. My stomach had been uncertain for days now, nerves and anticipation warring with each other. But I drank tea and listened to Lydia talk about the neighbourhood, about our mutual friends, about normal life continuing just 3 miles away while I sat in suspension. After lunch, Lydia drove me back to Rose Hill. I didn't ask her to come inside. This place wasn't for visitors, it was for people who had been set aside. That afternoon, I walked. Not the courtyard loop. I walked out the front door, down the driveway, and onto the sidewalk beyond the property. No one stopped me. No one called after me. The doors weren't locked. I was not imprisoned. I was simply expected to stay. I walked for 15 minutes just to prove I could, then returned. Mabel was in the common room when I came back. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite name. "You walked out," she said. "Yes." "How far?" "Far enough to know I can." She nodded slowly, something like hope and something like grief moving across her face. "When you leave," she said quietly, "will you visit me sometimes?" "Yes," I said. "I promise." That night in my narrow bed, I held the envelope with the new keys and thought about walking through my own front door, about sitting in Robert's chair, about sleeping in my own bed where I had slept for 42 years. Soon, I thought. Very soon. On Sunday morning, I called Lydia at 7 a.m. "Today," I said. "I'm leaving today." "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said without hesitation. I packed my suitcase the way I had unpacked it 3 weeks ago. Slowly, carefully, every item folded and placed with intention. I was not fleeing, I was leaving with dignity. I left a note for Mabel on her nightstand. "Thank you for your kindness. I'll visit on Thursdays for tea. You'll come to my house next time. I promise. Helen." I stopped at the front desk where a young coordinator I didn't know was reviewing charts. "I'm checking out," I said, handing her my room key. She looked confused. "Mrs. Munro, you need family authorization." "No," I said calmly, "I don't. I'm 74 years old and of sound mind. I have revoked the power of attorney my children held. I am not a ward, I am not incapacitated. I am a resident who is choosing to leave. If you require documentation, I can provide my attorney's contact information." She blinked at me. "I'll need to get the administrator." "Feel free, but I'm leaving now. My ride is here." I walked out the front door into October sunshine that felt like freedom itself. Lydia was parked in the Circle Drive. I put my suitcase in her trunk and got into the passenger seat and closed the door on Rose Hill and everything it represented. "Ready?" Lydia asked.
I've been ready for 3 weeks.
The drive took 12 minutes, past the drugstore where I'd picked up prescriptions for 40 years, past the elementary school where David and Emily had attended, past the corner market where Robert used to buy his newspaper every Sunday morning. And then we turned onto Maple Street, and there it was, my house. White clapboard, black shutters, the oak tree in the front yard that Robert and I had planted the year Emily was born. Home. Lydia pulled into the driveway. I sat there for a moment, looking at the house I had thought I would never see again, the house my children had tried to sell as though I were already gone. "Do you want me to come in?" Lydia asked gently. "Just for a moment, to make sure I remember how." We walked up the front path together. I unlocked the door with the new key, and the lock turned smooth and clean, and the door opened, and I stepped into my own house for the first time in 3 weeks. Everything was as Lydia had described. Books on shelves, photos on the mantel. My teacups hanging on their hooks in the kitchen. The house smelled like lemon polish and something green and living that I realised was the potted herbs on the kitchen windowsill that Lydia must have been watering. I walked through each room slowly. Living room, kitchen, Robert's study, our bedroom with the quilt my mother had made, the one I'd been sure would be donated or thrown away. In the bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and felt the mattress conform to my weight, familiar and right. And something that had been clenched tight in my chest for 3 weeks finally released. "Thank you," I said to Lydia, who had followed me upstairs, "for everything, for believing me, for helping me." "You helped yourself," she said. "I just opened a few doors." After she left, I stood in my living room and looked at my things, at my life, at the space I had reclaimed inch by inch through phone calls and signatures and quiet, determined refusal to disappear. Then I went to the kitchen and made tea. David arrived the next morning at 8:30. I heard his car in the driveway, heard his footsteps on the porch, heard him try his key in the lock. When it didn't work, he knocked hard. I let him knock 3 times before I opened the door. "You changed the locks," he said. Not a question, an accusation. "Yes, Mum, this is insane. You can't just—" He stopped, looking past me into the house. "You cleaned everything up." Lydia helped. Lydia. He said her name like a curse. She had no right. She had every right. I asked for her help, unlike my children, who made decisions about my life without asking me anything at all. We stood there in the doorway, my son and I saw exactly what I had been avoiding seeing for years, that he didn't see me as a person anymore. I was a problem, a liability, an item on his to-do list that he had thought he'd checked off when he left me at Rose Hill. "You're making this so much harder than it needs to be," he said finally.
Harder for whom?
For everyone. Mum, we were trying to help. The house was too much for you. You were alone. We thought... You thought I was done, I said. You thought my life was essentially over and you could just file me away somewhere convenient, package up my things, sell my house, divide my money, move on. That's not fair, isn't it? I stepped back from the door. David, I'm not asking you to understand. I'm telling you how it is. This is my house, my life, my money. I've revoked your power of attorney. I've secured my assets, and I'm going to live here in my home for as long as I'm able. If you can't accept that, you don't need to visit. He stood there, anger and something else, hurt maybe, or just confusion, moving across his face. Then he turned and walked back to his car without another word. I closed the door and leaned against it, breathing carefully, because telling your own child to leave is harder than you'd think, even when that child has tried to erase you. That afternoon, the doorbell rang again. I almost didn't answer, but I looked through the window and saw not David's sedan, but a small blue Honda I didn't recognize. The young woman on my porch had Emily's eyes and David's nose, and was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt and a nervous smile. "Grandma?" she said when I opened the door. "It's Eloise, Emily's daughter. Can I come in?" I hadn't seen Eloise in 2 years. She'd been away at college, then working in California, sending Christmas cards, but rarely visiting. She was 24 now, and looking at me with an expression I recognized, worry and something else. Guilt, maybe. "Of course," I said, stepping back. We sat in the living room and she looked around at everything, the books, the photos, the furniture, as though seeing it for the first time, even though she'd spent holidays here as a child. "Mum told me what happened," she said finally, "about Rose Hill, about the house, about you revoking the power of attorney. She's upset, angry. She says you're not thinking clearly." "And what do you think?" I asked. Eloise was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I think you're the clearest person in this whole mess. I think Mom and Uncle David convinced themselves they were helping, but really they just wanted things to be easier for them. I think they forgot you're a person with your own wants and your own life. And I think," she looked at me directly, "I think I'm sorry for not visiting more, for letting them do this without pushing back. I should have called you, should have asked if this was what you wanted." Something tight in my chest loosened slightly. "You're here now," I said. "Can I visit sometimes? Just you and me? I'd like that very much." After she left, I sat in Robert's chair, the leather one by the window that I had avoided since he died, the one that smelled like him and felt like him, and hurt too much to touch. I sat in it now and looked out at the garden that needed work, and the street where leaves were falling, and the world that was still mine. I was not invisible. I was not erased. I was here. Emily came on Thursday. I saw her car pull up. watched her sit in the driveway for a full minute before getting out. She knocked softly, not like David had knocked, and when I opened the door, her eyes were red. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had taught her to make pie crust when she was 10, where we had addressed her wedding invitations, where we had drunk coffee and talked about her children and her job and her life. "I was wrong," she said finally. The words came out rough, unpracticed. "I thought I was helping. I thought you couldn't manage anymore. I thought—" She stopped, started again. "I was scared. After Dad died, after you fell, I was so scared something would happen to you and I wouldn't be there. So I decided to fix it, to make sure you were safe. But I didn't ask what you wanted. I took over." "Yes," I said, "you did. I don't know how to fix this." "You start by accepting that I don't need fixing. I need respect. I need autonomy. I need you to remember I'm your mother, not your project." She nodded slowly, tears spilling over. "Can I still visit?" "Yes, but you knock. You don't just walk in. You ask before you make decisions about my life, and you accept that no means no." "Okay." She wiped her eyes. "Okay." After she left, I stood in my kitchen and felt the weight of it all. The fighting, the reclaiming, the boundaries I had drawn in ink and law and quiet determination. It had cost me 3 weeks at Rose Hill. My dining room chairs donated and gone. The ease of relationship I had once had with my children, replaced now with something more honest but less comfortable. But I was here. In my house, in my life, myself. I called Mabel that afternoon. "Thursday tea?" I said. "My house. I'll pick you up at 2. Her voice when she answered was small and wondering. "Really?" "Really, I promised." On Friday, I worked in the garden. The roses needed deadheading. The perennials needed cutting back. I worked slowly, feeling my muscles remember the motion, feeling the earth under my knees, solid and real and mine. That evening, I opened the journal I kept in my nightstand, the one I'd written in for years, recording ordinary things, the weather, what I'd planted, when Robert had made me laugh. I hadn't written in it since before Rose Hill. Now I picked up my pen and wrote. October 29. Back home. Garden needs work. So do I. But we're both still here, still growing, still worth the effort. If you're reading this and you recognize yourself, the one who always says yes, who makes yourself smaller so everyone else has room, who has been told your needs don't matter anymore because you're old or difficult or inconvenient, listen. Your life is yours, not theirs, yours. Your silence isn't kindness. Your accommodation isn't love. Your disappearance isn't peace. You are not furniture to be moved into storage. You are not a problem to be solved. You are not done. It will cost you to reclaim yourself. It cost me dining room chairs and easy relationships, and the comfortable fiction that my children knew best. But what it gave me back was bigger: my home, my choices, my dignity, myself. Don't wait for permission to exist. Don't apologize for taking up space. Don't let anyone, even people you love, especially people you love, convince you that you have less right to your own life just because you've lived more of it. The doors aren't locked. They never really were. You just have to decide to walk through them. I closed the journal and looked around my bedroom, my bed, my dresser, my things, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not just relief, not just peace. Something simpler and more profound. Belonging. I belonged here, in this space, in this life, in this skin that was 74 years old and still mine, still capable, still worth fighting for. Outside my window, the maple tree was almost bare now, its leaves fallen and mulching into the earth, feeding next year's growth, the cycle continuing, life insisting on itself despite everything. Tomorrow I would call Mabel. We would have tea. I would show her my garden and my house and my life reclaimed. And maybe she would remember that she too was not done. Tomorrow, but tonight I was home.